In the ever-churning waters of British public opinion, there are rare moments when the tide turns so visibly that even the most entrenched voices of the establishment can't ignore it. This week, one such moment erupted across social media, sparked by a single piercing observation from royal historian Kate Williams. In a tweet that went viral within hours, Williams didn't mince her words. The British media's treatment of Meghan was appalling, and its echoes of the cruelty directed at Princess Diana were undeniable. The suggestion was clear and damning. This relentless harassment and targeted character assassination were key reasons Prince Harry and Meghan fled the UK. The tweet didn't just make waves, it unleashed a storm. For years, the narrative around Harry and Meghan had been dominated by tabloid sensationalism, royal PR spin, and the endless drip feed of misinformation. But suddenly here was a respected historian holding up a mirror to the British public and the institutions they revere. And this time, the reflection was ugly. Comment sections, usually battlegrounds of hostility when Meghan's name is mentioned, began to shift. Words like ashamed, heartbroken, and regret started replacing the usual vitriol. Britons who once dismissed Harry and Meghan as oversensitive or attention-seeking were now publicly admitting that maybe, just maybe, they had been too quick to believe the headlines. For many, the parallels between Meghan's treatment and that of Diana in the late 80s and 90s were impossible to ignore. Diana had been hounded by paparazzi, vilified in the press, and left vulnerable by a royal family that seemed more concerned with preserving its image than protecting one of its own. In Meghan's case, the cycle repeated, but with a modern twist. The 24/7 online news cycle, fueled by social media algorithms, ensured that attacks weren't limited to the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. They were constant, global, and amplified in real time. The criticism was often laced with a nastier undertone, a venom rooted in racism, xenophobia, and misogyny. Kate Williams's tweet landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples into even the most resistant corners of the public consciousness. The historian reminded followers that the lessons of Diana's tragic fate had been loudly promised, but never learned. "We said we wouldn't let this happen again," she wrote in a follow-up comment, "but we did. And worse." The words cut deep. And the timing, years after Harry and Meghan's dramatic step back from royal duties, made them all the more haunting. This wasn't just a matter of hindsight. It was a reminder that the truth had been there all along, buried under the tabloid noise. Public reaction was telling. One user wrote, "We mocked Harry for leaving, called him weak, but now I see he was protecting his wife and family. We failed them both." Another said simply, "I'm embarrassed to be British." This was bullying on a national scale. The sense of national self-reflection, though not universal, was undeniable. The comments also laid bare the double standards that had been in play. Prince Andrew, embroiled in scandal, accused of association with a convicted sex offender and facing serious public outrage, had been quietly shielded by the palace and treated far more delicately by certain media outlets. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry were subjected to front-page smears for everything from holding hands in public to choosing to christen their children privately. For many, this stark contrast stripped away any illusion of fairness or impartiality in the royal narrative. And then there was the matter of legacy. Many commenters noted that Prince Harry's actions, from his charitable work to his outspoken advocacy on mental health veterans' welfare and equality, seemed far more in line with Diana's ethos than those of his elder brother, Prince William. While William's public image remained carefully curated by palace aides and bolstered by friendly media coverage, Harry had taken a more hands-on, often confrontational approach, unafraid to challenge both the media and the monarchy itself. For his supporters, this was proof that he was living up to the promise Diana had shown the world, the promise of compassion, authenticity, and defiance in the face of injustice. The thread of racism ran through much of the online conversation. Even in 2025, it remains uncomfortable for some Britons to acknowledge how deeply ingrained prejudice can be in the nation's institutions and media. Yet it was impossible to ignore how Meghan, a mixed-race American woman, had been subjected to a level of scrutiny and abuse far exceeding that of other royal brides. From headlines likening her to a gangster's mole to the infamous Straight Outta Compton reference, the tone had been set from the start. and when she dared to speak about her struggles, the pushback was swift, cruel, and often coded in the language of racial resentment. Right-wing outlets such as the Daily Mail and Daily Express were repeatedly singled out in this public reckoning. Their relentless coverage of Meghan, much of it exaggerated, misleading, or outright false, had set the tone for the rest of the media ecosystem. By contrast, their treatment of certain senior royals involved in genuine scandal was strikingly restrained. It was as if the press had decided who the villains were in their ongoing soap opera of royal intrigue, and facts were secondary to the narrative. Kate Williams's post forced many to confront an uncomfortable truth. The abuse was not just a media problem, it was honestly a national one. After all, newspapers print what sells. Online outlets, well, they run what gets clicks. The appetite for stories about Meghan, especially the negative ones, had been absolutely voracious, and the public had, in a way, fed the beast. In that sense, every click on a nasty headline, every share of a misleading story was, part of the problem. The shame many Britons now expressed wasn't just about what had been done to Harry and Meghan, but about what had been done by society as a whole. In Montecito, far from the palace gates and the Fleet Street offices, Harry and Meghan have built a life on their own terms. Their supporters honestly point to their thriving charitable foundation, successful media projects, and, well, a seemingly peaceful home life as proof they made the right decision. The contrast between their current life and the one they left behind could not be starker. In Britain, they were the perpetual targets of a hostile press and an indifferent institution. In California, they are free, not from criticism, but from the daily barrage of cruelty that once defined their existence. As this conversation continues to swirl, one thing has become clear: history is being rewritten in real time. The dominant narrative of petulant Harry and diva Meghan is, honestly, losing ground to a more nuanced and perhaps more truthful version, one in which the couple's departure is seen not as a betrayal, but as an act of self-preservation and courage. In this version, they are not the deserters of royal duty, but survivors of a toxic system. The shame many Britons now feel may not erase the harm that was done. It won't undo the years of abuse, the sleepless nights, or the toll on mental health. But it does matter. Public opinion shapes history, and history shapes legacy. The fact that people are willing to admit they were wrong, to apologize in the court of public discourse, suggests that the story of Harry and Meghan's time in the UK is far from settled. It is still being written, and perhaps at last it will be written with honesty. In the end, Kate Williams' viral tweet did more than call out the media. It held a mirror up to an entire nation. It reminded Britain that the treatment of Harry and Meghan was not an isolated failure, but part of a repeating pattern, one that cost the life of a beloved princess and drove her youngest son to protect his own family at all costs. The shame and regret now surfacing may not come from everyone, but from enough voices to suggest a shift in the wind. If there is any justice in this story, it is that Harry and Meghan have found peace and purpose far from the institutions that failed them. And if there is any lesson to be learned, it is that cruelty, no matter how it is dressed up in the language of tradition or duty, leaves scars that last for generations. History will judge the monarchy, the media, and the public for what happened. But perhaps the most important judgment will be the one Britain makes on itself. Will it choose to learn, to change, to finally break the cycle of harm? Or will it wait until another life is shattered before it asks the same regretful question again? How did we let this happen?